Hello everybody, my name is Svetlana Boyle and today I am here to present my grant proposal. My grant proposal is titled The Effects and Implications of Climate Change on Native Species of New Jersey. First, before I get into everything, I'd just like to read the abstract really quickly to help you get a better understanding of what this is going to be about. Biodiversity is a measure of the variety of life within a specific region. However, the biodiversity of ecosystems across the world are threatened by climate change and its associated effects on species. Since there are no current ways to measure exactly how biodiversity is being affected by climate change, our research aims to utilize ecological surveys of 5 different locations within New Jersey to measure and determine the biodiversity of these regions. These regions include various ecosystems from wetlands to hardwood forests, and the data collected at these regions will be collected at the same time each year over the course of 5 years to determine how the biodiversity of these regions has changed over the course of a 5-year period. It is our aim that this research can eventually serve as a baseline for further research, as well as provide valuable information about which ecosystems and species are most threatened by climate change. So first, I would like to talk about native species and biodiversity. Native species are species that are indigenous to a given location or region, and this means that they have evolved for survival within these ecosystems and thus are best adapted to live within the environmental conditions and local climates of these ecosystems. Native species are important because they support each other and have complex relationships with one another because they've co-evolved over time. Native animal species often very heavily rely on native plant species for survival, and vice versa. Biodiversity is a measure of the variety of life and can be used to determine the health of an ecosystem. Decreased levels of biodiversity can indicate that an ecosystem or ecological community is at risk. Now, climate change poses a threat to biodiversity because it exacerbates the established risks within ecosystems, and I will talk about this a little bit later. Now I want to talk about climate change, what it is, and genetic diversity. Climate change is any change attributed to humans within the biosphere. Now, these can occur from human activities, from agricultural production to growing cities, to increased research use, and even waste disposal. These are all factors that have very large effects on the planet since they disrupt the natural cycles and balances that the Earth already has. Now, one example of a disrupted cycle or balance in the Earth is the concentration of gases in our atmosphere. Human activities has resulted in the combustion of fossil fuels, and the combustion of fossil fuels has increased concentrations of specific molecules in our atmosphere, such as methane, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other greenhouse gases. This has resulted in the creation of a positive feedback loop in which the concentrations of these gases only grows and eventually creates a warming effect on the environment of the Earth as a whole. Now I'd like to talk about genetic diversity. Genetic diversity is a measure of how diverse a gene pool is within a species or population. Now, previous studies have shown that biodiversity loss is a direct effect and consequence of human activities, but current research also shows that genetic diversity within a species is also affected by climate change. Genetic diversity and biodiversity are related because species that have higher levels of genetic diversity are more likely to be able to adapt to changes in their environments and evolve within their ecosystems, which then protects and maintains the biodiversity of these ecosystems. Recent research on the adaptive responses of animals to climate change has discovered that it is most likely insufficient and that climate change may threaten the persistence of species. Even species that exhibit high levels of genetic diversity are unable to adapt to the changes that are occurring in ecosystems as a result of climate change. This just means that climate change threatens biodiversity through many changes, like changes in atmospheric concentration of gases, warming temperatures, sea level rise, and extreme weather events. These are all changes in the ecosystem that are expected to change the environmental conditions and negatively impact native species. Now I'd like to talk about why I selected New Jersey as the research location. New Jersey is a state that is rich and diverse in plant and animal life and features many different ecosystems that each have their own unique sets of flora and fauna. New Jersey is also among one of the locations where climate change can and will impact natural resources, including the plant and animal species and biodiversity. I also chose New Jersey because it has wetlands and coastal ecosystems that are currently considered among the most vulnerable to changes in the climate. Wetlands are considered one of the most productive ecosystems in the world, and they are very important because they provide habitats for thousands of both aquatic and terrestrial species. They also protect shores from erosion, meaning that they protect all the inland ecosystems as well. Specifically, the wetlands of New Jersey provide habitats for major portions of the state's fish and wildlife and many of their endangered species as well. So now I want to talk about why I want to study the effects of climate change on native species. But first, I do have to talk about the existing stressors that are on species currently. Existing stressors on species include pollution, habitat loss, invasive species, exploitation, and many others. Climate change exacerbates and is existing and compounds with these existing stressors to have even more negative effects on species. Currently, climate change has been associated with the shifting of the timing of seasons and migrations of specific species. It also has disrupted interspecies relationships and altered the composition of species in any given area, among many other harmful effects. The implications of climate change make it really important that we understand exactly how climate change is affecting the biodiversity of native species. The aim of this study is to measure and determine species composition and biodiversity within different ecosystems of New Jersey. And how we're going to do that is that we will be collecting and analyzing video data, calculating species composition and biodiversity, and then determining how native species populations are changing in response to climate change over the course of 5 years. Now this brings us to the research design and methods. This research utilizes a quantitative design because it allows us to get specific data about the number of species and individuals that are identified within those different regions in New Jersey. And the data collected in this study will then be used to calculate species composition and biodiversity. This just means that the dependent variable of this study is biodiversity and species composition, and the independent variable is climate change. Now I'm going to talk about how I selected the different research locations. For this study, we have selected 5 regions in New Jersey, from the Troy Meadows wetlands, the Atlantic Highlands, the Pine Barrens, the Manahawkin Wildlife Management Area, and the Egg Island Fish and Wildlife Management Area. These are all protected areas in the state that have the most protected areas for flora and fauna. And these regions were not randomly chosen. They were strategically selected due to their unique ecosystems from each other that should exhibit different measures of species composition and biodiversity just naturally. And these regions also represent aquatic, terrestrial, and wetland ecosystems, which already also have natural differences in their species composition and biodiversity. So how we're going to collect data is we are going to be placing 3 trail cameras in each of these 5 regions that are going to be recording video data for a period of 24 hours. The collected video data will then be quantified to identify all the native plant and animal species, and then from that data we are going to be calculating species composition, and biodiversity. Further sets of data are going to be collected and analyzed at the same time for 5 consecutive years. And after 5 consecutive data sets have been collected and analyzed exactly a year apart, the data sets will be graphed to determine the changes in biodiversity and species composition over the course of 5 years. And the intent of this is to understand exactly how climate change has affected the biodiversity of the native species within different ecological systems and regions of New Jersey. Now I'm going to talk about our budget. This study requires 4 personnel, 2 data collectors who will be quantifying our video data, 1 data analyst who is going to be doing the calculations for species composition and biodiversity, and 1 site setup person who is going to be going to our sites, setting up the cameras, and then taking them down at the end of the study. The data collectors and analysts are going to be paid $1,200 per week and will work for 5 weeks over the course of 5 years. Our site setup person is going to be paid $700 per week and will work for 2 weeks over the course of 5 years during the setup process and the takedown process of each site. The only equipment necessary is going to be 15 wildlife trail cameras, around $150 each, and 2 laptops for data collection and analyzing, valued at $700 each. Accommodation and travel costs are only necessary for our site setup person during the setup and takedown of our research sites, and includes hotel accommodation for 10 nights, valued at $200 each, and 40 gallons of gas, valued at $3.50 per gallon. And we do not expect any further supplies, indirect expenses, or incentives, which brings our budget to a total of $25,190. Now I want to talk about why this research is so important. Current research has shown that native plant and animal species of New Jersey are in danger due to climate change. But it's still unknown exactly how climate change is threatening and affecting the biodiversity of New Jersey's valuable ecosystems and valuable native species. Our research gives us an answer and some insight into that question. If climate change trends continue, it's unknown just how many of New Jersey's native species are going to be negatively impacted or become threatened with extinction. This makes it imperative that we understand the direct effects that climate change has on these native species. This research, although it will give us valuable information, is only the first step. This proposed research will help identify the recent short-term effects that climate change has caused within various ecosystems and regions of New Jersey, and we hope that it can eventually serve as a baseline for further research, as well as potentially identify the species and ecosystems that are most threatened by the world's changing climate. These last 2 slides I'm going to show you contain my references in case anyone is interested into looking at the sources that I used for information, as well as inspiration for research design. Thank you for your time, and I hope you now understand just why it is so important to protect our native species and identify how climate change is affecting them. Thank you.